TruthSeekah and or its affiliates are not responsible for any strange phenomena that may occur during or after listening to this podcast, which may include the following: heightened senses of awareness, psychic abilities, UFO sightings, alien contact, time loss, out-of-body experiences, ringing in the ears, ESP, lucid dreaming, increased synchronicities, astral projection, telepathy, stronger intuition, levitation, miraculous healings, and or remote viewing. Please be advised to listen at your own discretion.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? To a place to walk on troubled seas, faith to stand when I don't believe. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
You are now locked into the TruthSeekah podcast.
Gargoyles, psychics, everything's ungodly. Dark Savage.
Streaming live at TruthSeekah.com.
She's not a Christian.
Give it up, y'all.
Your portal to the paranormal, esoteric, and all things spiritual.
She's tampering in Dark Savage stuff.
And now, your host, TruthSeekah.
Yo, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is the TruthSeekah podcast. I'm your host, TruthSeekah, back with another. Today, we're doing 2 episodes today, back to back, and excited and delighted to be with you guys. So, got some good conversation. Got a great guest planned up for you guys today. So, can't go any further without saying thank you again to the beautiful Patreon supporters, everybody who enables me to do what I'm doing and bring this work to the table, my music, the podcast, the art, everything that we're doing with the videos and all that cool stuff. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart. I want to welcome some of the new members that we've had within the last week or so. Special shout out to Alba Rodriguez, Alex Sampson, Corianne Mitchell, and Hornweg Sebastian. Let me know what country you're tuning in from, brother. Thank you guys for the support. It means the world. If you would like to get access to the material that we're putting out, some of the exclusive stuff, my entire discography of music, which is 10 plus albums, as well as all the new music that I'm creating, head on over to patreon.com/TruthSeekah. There you get access to all that beautiful stuff, as well as our Thursday night sessions that we do, which is the School of the Mystics. That's the community aspect to what we're building here, the hands-on aspect. So that's the fun stuff. So head on over there, check that stuff out. Huge thank you to Noah, Adam Brink, and Benny Ween and family for supporting at the Diamond Body level. Thank you guys and everybody else for supporting. Much love. Thank you. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's discussion. I've got a awesome guest lined up for me today, Leigh Mccloskey. Leigh, welcome to the podcast, brother. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Good to be with you.
Good to have you on, man. I was introduced to your work through our mutual friend, Laurel, and Laurel Erica, which she's a wordsmith in herself and beautiful woman. And so she had a bunch of friends she was introducing me to, and you was one of them, and she spoke highly of you. Checked out your work, and I was like, man, I've never seen anything on you. But then as I'm starting to do the research, you're kind of everywhere, man. So I'm excited to have you on today.
Beautiful man.
Heck yeah. Well, you're kind of sitting in somewhat of a shrine for people who are watching on YouTube. For those of you who aren't, there's a bunch of picture frames and pictures and shelving and desk and tables. Everything's painted with looks like some type of psychedelic art, a little bit of maybe some geometry, maybe a little bit of everything, some space, some planets, a little bit of everything. But it's really beautiful art that's actually he's using for his backdrop. So I guess that's a great place to start, man. We can start with your background and what you bring to the table. But what's up with the art, man? Because you're pretty much, your home has turned into a temple or shrine of art, right?
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I maybe can turn the computer around and show you some of the rest of the studio, because I really love talking with people like yourself, creative people, musicians, artists, because we really have to, so many people think it's about critique, and I say artists do that for themselves. We have to inspire each other. So my home, and why the art is here, is 37 years ago when I was working as an actor in Hollywood. I was doing a show called Dallas. And I realized at that point that although that gave me certain things, creatively it wasn't fulfilling. I still had to have the conversations like you're having with your show, where you're having ideas, you're being stimulated by where are your resources, what's going to stimulate your creativity. So my home, I've always dedicated to discussion groups. 37 years ago, I started having Tuesday night discussion groups out at the Theosophy discussion group for 25 years, every Tuesday night. And to balance that, I had a Western inner tradition, looking at everything from Jung and alchemy to a lot of Joseph Campbell and mythology. So my home has always been a place where my motto is, at least here, let these things matter. And let's not worry about convincing the neighbor, but let's look at each other and say, if this matters to you and matters to me, that's a beginning, that's relationship. And that I take from musicians and actors, meaning when we get together, we want to create a space of mutual trust so we can enjoy that place where we discover what neither one of us would do alone. And this amplifies us. And this is really the nature of the discussion groups here over the years, and why the art is, to a great degree, the outcome of all of the questions I couldn't ask in the world, but I certainly was not going to not ask when I was home. And I found over the years, a lot of people were interested like I was, and they became the resource.
Very similar story, man. And I've kind of used my home and the internet, for that, because I come out of evangelical Christianity, but I was always into some of the deeper stuff, even within the Bible, but I couldn't ask those questions, those deeper questions out there, or aliens or life or psychedelics or anything like that. But I went to the internet and I started a podcast and got scrutinized, and it was silly. I'm down here in the Bible Belt. And then eventually it kind of, what I'm saying, because I was consistent, it caught on. And those people who were into that stuff are all around supporting it. So it's awesome when you have your own safe space like that to kind of explore those ideas without scrutiny, right?
Well, and that's also, if you think about why, everyone thinks it's about war and about violence, about all these things to change things, but it's story that changes our human condition. It's what we think we're capable of. And if you look at really the world as sort of an autoimmune reaction from the creative mind, it says, if we begin to give a place where these things matter, then if the music's good, like with you, it'll start attracting people because you've given them a place that they know they can go to. Because a lot of people are alone, but they don't know that you can actually talk about these things. And that's another point of why this is my home, is I'm a very big exponent of you must find places where you feel safe to talk about certain things. Otherwise, you're defending them, and they can never, in a sense, become part of your real creative resource, because you're defending them against people that are against it. But really, the people against it are usually just afraid and would rather not talk about these things. And so I think we're being more wise now to say, well, let's talk amongst ourselves. Yeah. If we can create a story that isn't threatening, but really inclusive, then we've done the job of the storyteller and the musician, the actor, which is not to judge the audience, but to say, you know what, you're more interesting.
Yeah. That's good. Hey, Leigh, if you don't mind, can you get a little bit closer to the audio? They're saying the audio is a little bit low, a little bit too closer to the computer. Be better.
Is that better?
Yeah, perfect. I think that whole idea is awesome, because it changed for me. Obviously, we're coming from two different aspects, but I see myself in that, and it's kind of like something universal that's working, because I went from trying to prove what I believe and trying to debate people out of their belief system to believe what I believed, and it only to try to solidify my beliefs because you believe in it as well. So it has to be right, or has to be true. But there was a peace, and there was an awesome place that I found myself in once I quote unquote gave up my right to be right, to win the conversation, to win the argument. Now, truth is truth, whether you've encountered it, experienced it, created it or not. And so just to be in that aspect of belief is beautiful, and I don't have to defend it, and the truth doesn't even have to, God doesn't need me to defend him or it, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, the mountains don't need to be defended by us. And that's really a very good point. That's an excellent point about the sense of we go from debate to conversation. That's why in my house, I've always had a round table. It's very Arthurian, the sense of, I want the excellence of my fellow knights. I want the story that, like any play, any musical piece, any dance, we are as good as what we put into it. And if we impose ourselves onto another character or want it to change, we misunderstand the nature of the play, which is, and I do feel this very strongly because my studio is a library as well, that it's the nature of the library, the desire to step back from fighting over the books and to realize that the library itself expresses that we are part of an enormous conversation, that if we're not against, we start to be able to put together. And like you start to, and like myself, we're starting to create community around a sense of place and not a sense of conflict, but a sense of gathering. That's why I call out, I say, I want you to think more like gardeners. Let's plant a seed, let's attend the soil, and let's be the ones that say, I'm not expecting things to happen. I'm creating the circumstances where they can grow.
There's other people who are doing stuff like that that's very similar. I look at Alex Gray and Cosm and you know what I'm saying, what he's bringing to the table, and people who are essentially using art to bring people together and creating a safe space for people to come together and have these discussions. What are some of the things that you guys do? Is it just kind of hanging out, having a couple drinks, talking about ideas? Do you put on events, music and things, DJs and things like that as well?
Well, actually that we put on, my wife and I for the last 10 years have had gatherings that really came off of my 37 years of these discussion groups. Now I've had discussion groups at my home from 8 to 10 for the last 37 years, every Tuesday night, and for about 20 of those years as well on Thursday night. And that was just really dedicated to exploring and creating a place of let's gather and read these books together. So I always use a book. Like right now on a Tuesday night, we're using Henry Miller's Wisdom of the Heart. We read Jung's The Red Book together in group. So we always use a book as a centralizing characters. So, because a lot of times if you have a salon and you just talk, as you know, the artists talk and they express themselves and everyone has and it's very good, but it doesn't have legs because it in a way isn't working with resource outside of the artist themselves. So I like to put a book, an author that says, hey guys, let's look at these ideas, because we all have, like you, with creative people, we all have ideas, so we need this other character that's saying, all right, well, let's bring these ideas together around this focus. And so that's really been a great tool. On Theosophy, we spent 9 years reading The Secret Doctrine, which is, I think, 30 pages. But it was great because every Tuesday night we would read a few pages, discuss it, go into it, and then go back. So there was this real sense of developing a discipline about really approaching these things. And taking it seriously with a sense of humor.
Yeah, that's awesome you say that, man. I'm just seeing all the similarities here. That's the thing is, like, even what we're doing on our Thursday night is that there's like a lot of us who just want to come together and just share and build and talk. And there's room for that too, kind of after. But I was like you, I want to go through a book together, a course, a discussion to kind of give a framework versus just, hey, we're hanging out, sharing ideas, but have this book where we're getting somebody else's ideas and almost imparting something to the people a little bit more than a hangout. So that's really cool you say that you always had a book that was the framework for that event, and we're going to study this together and kind of break it down. That's awesome.
It really works because in a way it frees everyone to be on the same page. I mean, literally. But I really do think that it's key because we do have to create tools that help us honor the conversation, not just as, in a sense, chewing the fat, which is fine, but really that by creating a place where we talk about these things, I think on a much deeper level, inversely, we're allowing these things to have a place. In other words, like something will not grow just because it does. It grows because we're finding our way through this, like about books, suggestions for one another. And this is why I always say to creative people, listen, we're dealing with primary technology. We're dealing with the imagination and story. This is something all the ancestors understand. They understand that, the winters are cold. We lose our children to death and animals, and we don't know what to do, but we can't tell a story about our misery. We have to tell a story that creates a sense of possibility for family. And I see this as the most primal need in our humanity. That's why I think the similarity between us is we're getting to a point of realizing it's not in a sense, the individual psychology of that person, but how each of us carry a different psychology that says, at least amongst ourselves, we have to make this, allow this to matter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and my motto is we have to learn to say yes rather than yikes. You know, and do that together.
Yeah, I've kind of adopted this saying, just essentially what works for you. Like, what are you doing with your practice, with your psychology, with your religion, whatever it is that you're bringing to the table? How is it working for you? And just to explore that in everyone and in everything versus what's not working. Like we kind of know what's not working. You just turn on the television, we can see what's not working. But what are you doing to get through day to day? So that's something awesome to find common ground with people on. Let me ask you this while we're just talking about your library a little bit too, and books. What's the oldest book that you have there, and what's the oldest Manly P. Hall book you have?
Well, I have the actually Petrus Bonus's the New Pearl of Great Price from 1546. The
wow.
Aldine. So I was very fortunate to be able to collect some real jewels, but I also realized this book Karma that you become very much a custodian. You realize some of these beings have lived 400 years, so they've lived through a lot of different people's lives, and so I would get an ancient text, and if it was in bad shape, I would have it restored, because I do feel this sense of a curatorial responsibility, which is why I think I have the library I do, is because I've never felt it an entitlement, but really this gathering of let's put together a story that really reflects that, humanity is always faced with great difficulty, but in spite of that, look.
Awesome. I know if I get that feeling by holding some of the original Blavatsky books, which I have one from like 1890 something, I think it is. I'm not really sure, but it's pretty old. But if you got some from the 1500s, I know you just feel like you're in the presence of a holy relic almost, right?
You really are. You have this feeling of you're not dealing with information. We have, because of computers and just the facts, man, we think that information, let's say on alchemy, is the same thing as alchemy. But part of the hidden secret of these traditions is the element of beauty. It's the element because it's living, that the components are not adding up to a type of scientific equation, A plus B equals AB. It's actually putting into the equation, we will put into that mix that allows this to grow into what it wants to become. And that's really, even going back to the library idea, you start to see that this is an ongoing question asked across the ages. And I'm thinking maybe should I walk with this? Would that work?
You can, for people who are watching on video, and then we'll try to explain it, or I guess you can explain it a little bit as well for people who are listening.
About the room. So I'm just trying to show us.
So the whole thing is essentially a library, or this is just that room?
Yeah, this room is you can start to see Eve painted on the pillar. You also start to see that, I don't know if you can see the floor. Oh yeah.
Beautiful. Now, what are some of the techniques to kind of tap into that state? I mean, I know a lot of the art would be called psychedelic art just because the the typography of it. Are you? I mean, have you guys practiced the use of some of the plant medicines and things like that?
Actually, I'm one of those beings that didn't need to get further out. I didn't need to find, in a sense, these doorways. They were too present in me. I needed to find a way to really. Let me see. I don't know if you can see that. Find a way to express this story of really our human identity. I'm sorry, I'm trying to frame it with this. Here we go. See, these are the old books. And you'll start to see how the library is painted.
Did you do the majority of it?
I've been working on this every day since 9/11/2001, when the towers came down.
Oh, wow.
And you'll start to see that it's actually written in a language that was revealed on 9/11 called the Watcher language. And this, you can see, is Mothership Revelations in pink. She's actually going to tell us this story that leads us into the story of the hieroglyph of the human soul. And so enough of that. I will bring us back here. Wheel, I'll show you. This is the you can see the tarot wheel down here, right? This is my drawings glued down to the, gosh, it's hard backward there. You see glued down in a wheel, but that also helps us understand the nature of the structure of the wheel. Why? Spokes of the wheel. Why does this story here in my home become relevant in a place where, sorry, there's a blurring light back there, where there's all of this work being done by people gathering in discussion. I was able to work on the tarot, on the archetypes, in an environment where I wasn't having to defend the work, because in the world I found, working on these traditions, you would find people rolling their eyes. They'd say, why? Or that's awful, or that's wicked. And I thought, as an actor, that's misunderstanding the play altogether. I played a lot of villains. And villains aren't really the bad guy. They're the catalyst. They're the ones that forced sort of the heroic out of the individual to take action. And that's why my work on the tarot, I liken to having built a piano, having understood the nature of the psyche as a cast of characters. So like the piano, we're not fighting over the keys. We're understanding the structure of how we're composed, so that finally on 9/11, my upstairs studio becomes this story that we're going to move into the imagination of the human story, but no longer use it as a means to escape our responsibility, but we will use it with the desire to return from inspired states to share it with those we love. You see, that's sort of the journey of the entire, really, last 37 years.
Where does the inspiration come from? Where do you think it comes from? Like, as far as like in the ethers on the other side, and like, are we being inspired by a higher intelligence, or is it the higher intelligence is all, in our brain, in our pineal gland almost?
I like to think of consciousness in states of compression, meaning that within all states of compression, like within every age of ourselves, 1, 2, 3, there's a unique wholeness or completeness, and that we are within, in a sense, a protected field. Because the loving element behind all of this is it doesn't want to overwhelm. It doesn't want to sweep away or actually create madness. And so for many, it stays very latent because of this deep concern that if your mind opens too quickly to too much, you will lose your identity. You won't know who you are. And so this is why in mystery tradition, in the tarot, in esotericism, that the human desire is to run before we can walk. And even in my book on the tarot, I quote Goethe, who used the Latin phrase, natura non facit saltus. Nature does not grow in leaps, meaning that, like wanting to climb a mountain, that if you think you can sort of skip over the exercises necessary to breathe at 30,000 feet, you're going to suffocate when you get up there, because you're not putting in the diligence, saying that it's not about me, it's about being worthy of the things I seek to know. You see, that's the shift. We're so used to thinking it's just information. That changes it from a book on the shelf of information into a quality of consciousness that says, listen, if you embody me, I will transform you from within. This is what I learned as an actor, is we're so used to looking at spiritual and religious states from the audience, as opposed to from the performer's sense that I learned by embodying the character. I think that's why my tarot is such rich work, is I was never a believer in the tarot. I had no need to. I don't believe in the characters in the play either. I'm interested in the play. I want to know in every age, these same characters keep reoccurring. You'd love to say, yeah, we got rid of the devil this time, but he says that's your mistake.
After all this time, you would think we learn how to outsmart the devil. You know?
Yeah. And he says, you got too smart for your own good. I outsmarted you.
Mm-hmm. These archetypes and stuff that you play. I just did a little documentary that I put together about the persona and familiar spirits,
right,
coming from the name. And I didn't even know this, but I was studying ventriloquism, and the Greek name for the familiar spirits was the ventriloquist, where we get the guy with the hand puppet now. And so they would it comes from the Oracle of Delphi, and how they would get high off of the gases that was coming up from the cave, and tell fortunes and things like that, and everything just starts running together. But to see the personas, and there's a freedom that kind of comes there when the scapegoat is available, when the guy who has the puppet, he can be a shy, timid guy, and he would say things that he would never say to the beautiful, voluptuous woman who walks by. He would never say it, but the puppet gives him the freedom to say it in character. Then I was like studying that and putting all the stuff together with the movie The Mask by Jim Carrey, and a lot of the quotes that come through there were like, when I'm wearing this mask, I become someone else, and I receive power and all of this stuff. When it puts the blame is shifted not upon Jim Carrey, but the mask, or whatever the case is. And so we see that with superheroes. When they wear the cape and they put their mask on, they become, Clark Kent turns into this, this hero, what I'm saying, who has these magical powers essentially. And it's really interesting when it comes to that notion with art as well. I can say things in art that early on was a lot easier for me to put into a song or a painting, a picture that would share that notion and take you on that journey, versus you getting with me. And there's different ways to do it, but the art and the music and stuff itself help to take you on that journey as well. And I don't even have to do much of the work. It exists. Yeah. I don't have to recreate it. Like, it's going to be there forever, essentially, right?
Yeah. And I think that relationship, because again, we're so used to illustrating, we're so used to believing things. And when you understand that the transmutation of art is that it resolves, it doesn't do away, because a lot of art, I always say, people think art comes from ideals, and it does to a certain degree, but it also comes from this trying to do something about the despair, trying to do something about inner turmoil that doesn't really make sense, doesn't have a type of logic to it. It simply has a type of aggressive energy that needs to be expressed. And it, I believe, oftentimes doesn't know what it wants to be any more than we know what it wants to be, which is why when we think about our approach to these things, we begin to honor the fact that if I want to know something, it's not to try and figure out what I believe or don't believe about it, but to enter into it, to feel the work transform me from within. This is why a lot of our sacred texts, the Bhagavad Gita, a lot of these different things are written in the first person. Because when you say, I am Krishna, where is Krishna? Who is, where am I not? Who am I not? When am I not? You're expressing, as you said, like the puppet, but you're expressing the true Krishna within you, because you created a residence for it in the same way that if you were playing Hamlet, you allow that character to live within you. You shape-shift into that character, and yet you don't lose yourself. You're not overwhelmed by that character. And this is one of the problems with a lot of magical tradition, is because there's belief involved rather than theatricality involved, one becomes entranced or trapped by the energy, rather than when you're acting and you feel these enormous energies flow through you, you have created the theatrical permission to not over-identify. Which allows you, interestingly enough, to really identify, because you're in charge, you're in control of these energies, so you can handle the enormous force. But oftentimes without context, people put themselves in the way of these enormous energies, and they really are swept away by them because they don't have the practical foundation. It's like having a lot of talent without anything to put it in. they're removed from, in a way, they never actually are able to apply their talent because they're the grounding or the keeping it in a sense where, like planting a seed. As a matter of fact, in my tarot, it's very interesting because you can see these are my drawings, but you can see that I don't create a magician to begin with. It's a magus. The magus is a hierophant, meaning a teacher of the sacred mysteries. And notice that this drawing is a seed. Do you see? And as we look at the seed, we're not looking at someone who is trying to trick us with smoke and mirrors and create optical illusions, but truly the gardener that says, these greater qualities of mind do not grow from the outside in. They are planted within your psyche, and as you nurture them, they will then grow, but they will grow as you. They won't grow as something outside of you. They will be your relationship with these things. And another very interesting clue was this drawing of mine for the world archetype is dated 9/11/1986. So it's 15 years to the day of the falling away of the Twin Towers. You can see the Twin Towers. You can see the pillars.
Yeah.
You can also see the female figure in the middle, which is this story of the falling away of the binary of patriarchy, the false erections of money and God, which have led us for the last 2,000 years to develop an ego. You know, I have to get somewhere. It's never about finding home. It's about where do I have to get to?
Yeah.
Myself. So this is the story. She says, but you see the tree, the mother, the feminine, the ancestors say you live in all worlds simultaneously. When you know this, because this is the world archetype, like the World Trade Centers, this is about Saturn and structure. Now think about always wanting to create music, but you spent thousands of years creating a piano. And I really think that this was what it's about, that it used to be one note of direct connection. And then we bent that light and lost that connection. And now it's become many notes in a recollecting at the end of time, so to speak. Like the library, the world, says you are the outcome of all of this. You're not one of the books in the library. You're woven of all the books in the library.
Yeah, that's good.
Telling us and proving to us as
yeah.
well. Oh, very cool. So that's my 2 cents on the archetypal and the mystical. But what I wanted to show was that what amazes me and delights me is that when we are in sympathy with these energies, a bit like being in sympathy with water when we're swimming with it, it allows us to take a journey and not drown in those waters. And yet we are the ones that have to create permission, give ourselves parameters. I say we can go anywhere, but we have to create that this is the, in a way, it's almost like a play saying, this is the permission I give. This is what I create. We have to be those that give ourselves permission. And I think we have to do it, what we're talking about at the beginning, not to convince others, but to say, at least amongst ourselves, if these things matter, then like the magus, we'll be planting a seed that will grow on its own. Because I always feel like, think about rock and roll, right? It comes along. Nobody needs to convince anybody to listen. You know, it's good. You start moving. And to me, that's a great idea. A great idea doesn't need to be defended, doesn't need to be believed. It just needs to be expressed.
That's so awesome you say that, man, because I've been kind of relating all this stuff back to the Bible, right? I come out of evangelical Christianity, and so I'm not running from the Bible. I'm diving into it even deeper and to see the archetypes that are from Genesis to Revelation and how we're not reading a history book, but we're reading about us. We're pretty much beholding into a mirror as we read the allegory of these characters and the golden calves and the other nations and the other armies that came against the children of God. And if you look up those names of those other nations and stuff, they mean different things that we go through in our life, about anxieties and fears and doubt and worry and how they overcame these other nations and stuff. And it's so beautiful. So a lot of people, it scares a lot of evangelicals because it's, this isn't really taught there. We're taught that it's all literal and that this stuff, like, really happened. So it kind of scares them. But I told them that, even if it never existed, if it was proven that it was all allegory, which they want to hold on to the literal sense, and that's fine. But if it was proven that it was all allegory and it never happened, it wouldn't change anything. The power behind those stories is it's not powerful if it really happened. You know, you want to prove that these people literally existed. It's powerful if you apply the principles of the allegory of the myth to your life, and you really get the essence about what is being conveyed there. It's powerful. And they even teach that in Sunday school. But for some reason, when we get older, it becomes about the literal, and we're trying to find Noah's Ark and trying to find the Ark of the Covenant and all of these type of things, when it all exists. It literally exists, but within you.
And I think that's why when you look at evangelicals, when you look at different ways people in a way are inspired by these ideas and thoughts, these allegories, these metaphors, these histories for different people, I really think that what we have to look at is that that's a sign of the strength of the Christ ethos, meaning that this is what the power of this idea is in each of us, whether one believes or doesn't believe. It doesn't really matter. It's part of Joseph Campbell talked about this in mythology. We're woven of these stories. And for me, there's been a great proof of this because in terms of Christ in the hieroglyph of the human soul appears on the floor. I was not expecting this because I didn't have, in a sense, a religious platform or an agenda. So I was very fascinated because Christ, also the story of Eve. My third book is called Adam Reborn and Eve Restored, a romance in 2 parts. Because I started to paint the pillar. You saw it when I walked around a bit. It's also, if you Google Leigh Mccloskey Eve painting, you'll see her because she appears very magically. I'm not illustrating her. And it's coming from the discovery process of the months of working on her. As she's being drawn forth, literally through my hand, she's telling me a story about Adam and Eve, and about Adam becoming lost, becoming atomized, lost, and how Eve becomes really in the story the one who draws Adam back into his deeper love because he became lost in history and time, violence and death, because he had separated from his beloved. But they come back, and it's very beautiful, and that's why I was very interested that in the most important part of the floor. Actually, I think this is worth, if you can see it, because this surprises me, but you'll start to see, I have to find out, because the screens are verse, it's a little hard. But let me know if you can you see this face coming up on the floor?
Yeah.
You see how there's an open eye on the right and a blind eye on the left? And this really started to show me the story of the Father, meaning that the blind eye, the knowledge of the Father through the journey of time, leads to the mirror of self-reflection. But as we come back down to this Christ, at the right angle, notice that the open eye of love will take us to Sophia, you see? Mm-hmm. And her story is the knowledge of I love, therefore I am. And this is the knowledge of the mother, and why we begin with the mother and with love. And if you think about the Christ of love, the good father and the good mother, and then the blind eye of the father of the law that tells us that you will take a journey, you see, into creation in order to blossom unique identity. And so much of this is using, again, the environment to express that many of the stories, the myths that we live by, really are part of each of our psychology, and that our arts are where we allow them to be manifest because we never insist that you believe in them. It's where we're generous, if you think about it. You can say to an evangelical, you know what? God bless you. You don't have to believe anything. It's not about belief. It's about consideration. And I always think if anybody was about consideration, it was Christ. Mm-hmm. Consider this. You might be worthy of salvation. You are uniquely worthy. Something in you is uniquely worthy. And I really do. Going back to Moses and the parting of the Red Seas, leaving Egypt, leaving alignment, obelisks and pyramids, into the desert. We're going to leave. We're going to be lost, right? because the ego is lost. It has to find its way on its own. It has to create laws for itself. And along comes the Christ impulse. Wait a minute. It's not just about the law. There's something beautiful in you, something worthy, but you have to develop it. It's not just given to you. It's a gift of the ages. This is why I've given talks on actually using a lot of Hildegard of Bingen's work, St. Hildegard, because she was an artist in the 10 and 1100s. Remarkable being, but her illuminations show the Christ figure within the rings of a tree, as if to say that it's not in any one time these qualities. These qualities are within every ring of the tree. And I really believe that this is what our arts bear out, because where art is, we see beauty, and where we see beauty, I think we really see the realization of what these deeper teachers were always trying to reveal to us. You're more beautiful than you think. Stop judging each other. Show up.
Mm-hmm.
Having a meal together. Because at the end of the day, if you don't heal one another, you are all sick.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about it is healing yourself first, and then going back to, be able to heal the others. Everybody wants to, and that's, I guess that's kind of like the, what I'm saying, the meaning of the parable where they talked about, Jesus talked about having trying to get the speck out of your brother's eye when you have a plank in your own, or a log.
Yeah, absolutely. These are fundamental etiquette of energy questions, I call them. Manners. It's like, how do you treat others, but also how are you treating that quality in yourself? Do you find some part of yourself a thief? Do you find some part of yourself a beggar? Do you find some part of yourself miserable that you hate?
Yep.
To me, the whole point is that we must do something with the truth that we're woven of these human conditions. That's what my work has proven to me deeply, is that we are holographic. And as a matter of fact, when I started the hieroglyph of the human soul, it began with, as I said, the Watcher language, which is a fractal language, meaning it's the iteration of the same character over and over again. And the first being to emerge woven of this weave was the Chinese mother goddess Kuan Yin. And she started to reveal that, she said, you make the mistake that you believe energy is objective. Energy is sentient. All is consciousness. All is whole and holy. You are holographic. And I started painting my floor, which is linoleum. And I have to say, well, nothing says ordinary better than linoleum. I'm painting the ordinary, and she's telling me this story that our sacred waters, think of art not as my art, but art, right? It's creation. It's flowing through us. So creation is saying that our eternal waters are returning home to the domestic space, meaning the questions aren't about how to convince the neighbor now. They're not interested. The question now is, how do we live? At least where I live, how do I allow the things that matter to matter here, even if they don't matter there? And to me, this is I call it a mental martial art. We start to realize what to pay attention to and what just makes us angry, in a sense. And I feel like that's what's upon us. A lot of people are understanding the lesson at the mirror. I say, stand at a mirror with your friend, and then think that you're looking into depth because you see yourself there. And think you see somebody behind you, you'd think they were in front of you in the mirror. And so if you didn't like the person you saw in the mirror, you'd throw something at them. But guess what? It would hit the mirror. It wouldn't go it would hit and explode back on you. And this is one of the great keys to anger, is tell somebody, I return your gift to you unopened. Don't open the gift of anger. Return it. That was one of the teachings of Christ.
There's something beautiful about being able to see yourself in the eyes of the others, and to know that essentially whatever you're doing unto someone, you're doing unto yourself, that we are all one. When it comes to art, and it becomes to, like, I've been exploring just the last day or so, this really crazy download about pride, prejudice, sickness is when there's not an adequate flow of that energy. When you're studying, all of these things can really be confusing to a lot of people. A lot of, the scripture says that knowledge puffs up with pride, and I know something you don't know. Like, there's that aspect that a lot of people have to kind of get over. I've been there. I know a lot of people who have, but to be open and honest, we have to let it flow. And I've seen this idea, this download, man, that I got, this crazy revelation that as we study, as we get these downloads, as we get all the information, and if it just sits stagnant, I feel like it turns into that pride, or it becomes stagnant within you, and it's supposed to flow. That we are to find creative outlets to either write about it, in your sense, almost going crazy, painting, getting it out, getting all of the stories, getting everything out. For me, putting it down in a song, and creating this masterpiece, this work of art that didn't exist until I created it. And that release that you get as a little creator, man, when I talk about the being made in the image and likeness of a creator, that feeling that we get whenever we create something, it's crazy. But I feel like that we have to be able to get it out. And it's not just about, the pride thing that comes, or I know this, or I know that, or I know that, but it's about helping people and making it practical, right? Like all of this stuff is practical. It sounds deep and esoteric and crazy, but it's practical. You can essentially apply the principles from all of this stuff to your life. And it's been said, if you can't take your philosophy and your ideas and your doctrines and break them down to a 5-year-old, then it's no good. Or if you can't help the person struggling with their own addictions and depression and things like that, then it's of no good. And there's a lot of people in those realms who study, they have all the crazy information, the occult knowledge, but it's not practical. It's not tangible, right? It's about making it practical and sharing it with people in a way that helps them and kind of, aids to their life or caters to them versus just being an idea.
Yeah. And I feel like that's the creative. This is why often when I give talks now, I really use the theatrical elements, because you can really start to get to understand with actors. When I'm working as a director with actors, first thing I say is, I want you to feel safe. If you feel safe, we're going to watch each other's back. Think of musicians, right? We're not going to make fun of each other. We're going to realize we make mistakes and we'll lean into them. That's why I love jazz. It's like, wow, that was a great mistake. Let's riff on it. And to me, that's art. I was a painter, and he said, painting is making mistakes. And if you're lucky, you make enough mistakes to make a painting. And it's sort of like life. It's that. And I think pride and all of these things, I think you're right, are when we become stagnant, when we become standing at the mirror of self-reflection and we need it about ourselves rather than this other way. I must express it. I do feel very strongly, because my art didn't come to be a painter. My dad was a painter. I was an actor. I was at Juilliard studying acting, and I started using painting as a way to connect emotionally. So I started throwing paint at the camera. Think about just using paint as a medium of emotional expression, hitting and punching, because I was playing a violent character and I just couldn't connect with the character. So I started trying to physicalize it, and I started to put together a lot of acting techniques and painting techniques, meaning that it's not to illustrate something, but to allow the emotional, the energetic state to manifest. And like seeing clouds, then to see what's in it and to create a dialogue with it. And that's why I think my art is what it is because it's never been an illustrator's art. I've never tried to draw anything. It's always been the same approach as with acting, is that I step into the question, and the question creates then, as you know, the necessary impulse.
Yeah.
Well, let's take this boat out of the harbor and see where we're going to go together. We don't know either, but let's keep diving in. I think that's really the key to who we are. It's the keeping diving in and being very vigilant about arrogance, because that usually comes out of insecurity.
Yeah.
Like nobody believes in it. I do, and I often say when people come for us, when we do our gatherings, because we have a number of gatherings every week now, and I always do a little walkabout of the studio, a tour, and I always say that, the books really reveal that we're always born into a world where we rush out thinking, gosh, this is wonderful. Isn't it wonderful? And everyone says, no, shut up. Don't talk to us about these things. So it's that sense of, I guess this doesn't matter. And so many, and even the books in the library said, you must understand historically that we were all pushed back home, in a sense that the only reason a lot of this work exists is because we did it in spite of being ignored. We did it because we had to do it, not because there was some reward at the end. The reward was the very need. As you said, I've created something with my hands. I've created a song with my heart. I've allowed something out of me. And we know, that which, if you let that which is without, without, you will be healed. And that's why art is not the illustration of something. It is the creative spirit. And I tell people now when they're standing in my painted studio, every brush stroke is a breath here. This is living breath. A painting is a lung. It wants to breathe with us. It wants to say, trust your imagination, and I will allow you to breathe into a larger sense of wonder and possibility. And this isn't something far-fetched. We know this with music. We know this with theater. We know this when we are transported but not swept to another planet. We're transported and we're still here so we can go have a really wonderful conversation together and be with the people we love. And for me, that was why so much of this was triggered on 9/11 when I saw people jumping out of buildings. All of my love of transcendence, of wisdom, of other traditions and ages, I realized in a flash, man, I want to hold the people I love. I want to be here. I don't want some erection making me think I've got more than you do. I'm on my knees. You know, and I really do think there's a big thing about this sense we rise out of the linoleum in this story. We rise up into domestic space because maybe the last question is intimacy. You know, we're so armored. We've battled our way for ages. How do you take the armor off? How do you find a place where you do feel safe, where you don't feel like you have to defend these things, where people aren't going to think you're crazy or weird because you defend them, you know? And we've all been through that. And that's why I think we're trying to say, stop trying to convince people who aren't interested in these things. You make them nervous. But if they are interested, be a good storyteller. Offer them something that includes them.
Yeah.
And that's what art does, right? Sing along.
Yeah, right, yeah. Find the others, man. Like as long as you stay faithful and as long as you stay consistent and don't give up, don't grow weary in well-doing, you're going to find the others. You know, and that's what you were talking about. Like people feel like they're alone, that they have nobody who feels a certain type of way that they do. And, you know, it could be lonely. It's a kind of a dark night of the soul that I think, you know, a lot of us have to travel. But once you don't die there, you make it out of that night, you know, on the other side, there is a light at the end of the tunnel now. So, you know, from, you know, the things and the ideas and the art and the concepts that I was demonized and laughed at over, now I'm praised over and they love it. And there's people, it's the right audience. And essentially I tell people this, go to where you're appreciated, go to where you're needed versus being where you're tolerated. Most people are just in a place and they show up because they're tolerated. Oh, there he goes again. Oh, crazy. So-and-so. Go to where you want it, man. There's a place for everybody, whatever, you know, no matter what your freak flag is, there's other people out there who have similar ideas and who are doing it and who are confident in who they are and you know what I'm saying, what they came to do. And once you know that, man, there's a power that's released to you, because you know who you are. And nobody gets to tell you who you are. You're like, look, I'm doing the self-discovery. I know who I am. And because you don't know who you are, it makes you feel insecure or you want to point fingers because I represent something within you that, like you said, you don't like about yourself. And when you understand that, you take the dog out of the fight and it's not about you anymore. It's about them and something that you represent a part of that person that they don't like about themselves. You're too free. You know, they're bound by this. They believe that if they do this, they're going to hell. And here you are doing it openly and freely, and you're okay. It's, you know, but it's good though. It really helps that person of you walking in your authenticity, no matter what it is. It helps that person eventually find freedom if you stay consistent with it. So just by being you, you're essentially setting people free, right?
Because I feel the creative are the permission givers. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to survive a world that doesn't care, that does think these things are strange because they put you outside of whatever the norm might be, because they're subjective. They're things that can't be controlled. So I do think that that's why that the creative beings really do need to, as you're saying, as I'm saying, think about the sense of that if we think more in not a tribal sense in a bad sense, but more like, you've got to remember in early times that there were those that said, you know what, I'm having inner experiences. I have all of these dreams. Maybe we can get some logs and some fire and some charcoal and do some drawings and tell a story tonight instead of just freezing at night. You know, in a way they were looking for, I think we've always been that in the human psyche. And maybe that's the point, like in a play, saying, all right, well, if these people play this, like they are afraid, so they're not the ones that are going to, in a sense, jump out of the nest. They're going to want to stay there. But there are those that do. And if I'm one of those people, And this is why I've always loved, and I think a lot of us do, people like William Blake and, Walt Whitman, because there's this ferocity, this fearlessness creatively to really just live in the integrity of the artist's vision, which is unapologetic to the nature of how most people want to stay within the confines of safety, in a way that, but I don't think that's for everybody. I just think that when an artist finds themselves with that responsibility to hold that role and to do what you're saying you're doing there and I'm doing here, which is, let's find those that care about these things, because we're exhausting ourselves fighting over, with people that don't care about these things. And maybe if we do, we can grow a garden that's beautiful enough to attract their attention, rather than signs and placards telling them that they're a bunch of idiots. Because people aren't idiots. People really do come from their heart. They're trying to make up a story that gives them a sense of satisfaction. And oftentimes when they project anger at others, they're afraid for the other people because of where they live, as you said. How can you do these things? And yet we must do those things because that's our part in the play.
Do you think that where we are now, do you think art is under attack, or liberties or free speech or the freedom to explore or the freedom to express yourself to some extent? Like we look at Roseanne, trying to make a joke, thinking, and she made an honest mistake supposedly, and her career is over because she missed it on. Are people too sensitive now? I think it's changing with the expression, especially with comedians and artists and things like that. You can't draw a picture of Muhammad. You can't make fun of the president. You can't hold up a picture with his decapitated head, and these type of things. So there's like things that are off limits now. Is it becoming more like that, or has it kind of always existed, you think?
I look at a lot of times repressiveness, whether it was during the time of the Inquisition, whether it's, that there's always those that are going to put the lid on things. But oftentimes it's, if you don't react against that, you start to become more subversive. You say, all right, well, I can't be that obvious. Maybe I need to be more subtle. I mean, this is one of the genius of the Renaissance painters. They got away with murder because they realized they could always say to the Pope or the Cardinal, oh, no, you misunderstand. It's not about this, it's this. It's a picture. You can interpret it. And that's why I feel like for us, this is why this is my home. There's this sense of, be strategic. Don't think about fighting these forces, because in a sense, that's what they thrive on. They're not a person, they're a quality. They're what's called an egregore, a thought form. Like energy attracts like energy. A lot of the problem with the arts is the AI. It's the artificial intelligence of the art world's self-congratulatory sense of what is important, which is this is an expensive work of art. It's about the value system rather than about art and about creative conversation. I really believe that the artists, I tell artists, don't ask people what they think about your work, ask them what your work makes them think. Demand that you get into a conversation, say, I'm not interested in your critique. I do that for myself. I'm interested in where we can go, because we can actually then draw the creative spirit into our shared conversation rather than critiquing the creative spirit. And you can walk away feeling superior because you didn't actually ever put anything on the line except your opinion. And I'm tired of that. I mean, I have to say that I'm as I say, you want to critique, then you bring your art to the table. You do it beautifully. You do what we used to do as alchemists. I would read your book if you wrote one 50 or 100 times. I would quite literally, like creating a character in a play, digest it, memorize it. So I wouldn't just respond knee-jerk. I would respect you. You're an artist. So now I've imbibed your art. I've drunk your wine. Let me tell you what it inspired in me. Do you see how that creates inspiration rather than a system that shuts each other down? Yeah. But I think that if we think like martial artists, the system out there that's shutting everyone down is saying, be strategic. Start gathering with those that these things matter to. Realize that a healing process isn't changing that. It's drawing that. And that's when we talk about feminine and masculine energy. Yeah. The feminine energy says, if you have to shout, don't, because they're not worth your time. Mm-hmm. If you whisper and attract their attention, you found a friend. Because this time it's not shouting. At this time, it's gathering. And I feel very strongly about that.
No, I'm with you 100% on that. I've been saying that with different words a lot lately as well. It's kind of a double-edged sword with the critique thing a little bit, because there's this notion of like you want to share your art with people who benefit from it, people who adore it, people who like it, people that it's going to help, right? Versus the person who is critiquing it and always finding flaws in it. Sometimes those people think they're doing you justice or doing you service, this, you know what I'm saying, this criticism that you know what I'm saying, is going to help you. But so that I've been told of, like, you know, I've been accused of having what they call yes men in your corner. You're just surrounding yourself with people who are saying, yes, I like it. I like it. You know, Donald Trump, got all these people around him. Yeah, I like it. You know, great. You know what I'm saying? Keep doing it. And so we get accused of having yes men around us and not taking critique and criticism, constructive criticism from people. But at the same time, because there's people who tell you, no, don't do that. I don't like the art. What you're doing, you've messed your house up. There's this, that doesn't look right. It's too much, you know what I'm saying, stimulant at all times, like all kinds of crazy stuff coming against you, right? But it takes that person who's able to kind of go in to the ethers, to the Dreamstate, to the Flowstate, and pull something out that nobody's done. Yeah. Like, nobody's done this. So how am I going to get your okay if you have no idea what the hell I'm seeing in my visions, I'm hearing in my head, and I'm able to go in and pull it out, and you're telling me not to because you've never seen it, you can't see the vision. You know, people want that pat on the back. They want people to say, oh man, keep doing it. You're doing a great job. Keep it up. But sometimes that's not there. And you have to go in anyway to the flow states, to the dream states, and pull that stuff out to be a revolutionary. And I think that's how great things are birthed.
I do too. I think also you have to look at everything from Blake and the Shoreham Ancients to the Sydney Circle to Transcendentalists, American Transcendentalists. And these have really been my models. One of the reasons I had the discussion with my home is I looked at Emerson, I looked at the American Transcendentalists. I said, listen, they're realizing the Civil War is coming. It's in a sense, the same type of terror that's going on. But the whole sense is we have to get together. If these things matter, if there's a deeper eternal nature of the human story, then it is up to us to really cultivate a place where we can talk about these things, we can write about these things, because history is not defined by our beginning or our ending, but it's defined by the willingness to add to the conversation, even in the darkest of times, the sense that something might be possible. And that's why I always feel that it comes out of the creative and imaginative, because, as I say, even in a state of despair, a piece of charcoal and a stone allows what we talked about, that expression to be made. And we're in a time, I really do think, of taking back the creative spirit for the creative spirit. And my motto here is, at least where I live, this matters to me. But this is my garden. It's not a garden that I'm interested in your critique of any more than I want you to critique my daughters or my wife. This has to do with my love. So if you want to know what is sacred, this. So this is not up for debate. It's not up for discussion. It's up for that which takes us into a place of shared inspiration. Because I'll tell you, from my musician friends, my actor friends, my artist friends, my lover friends that love life, I don't mean they're my lovers, but love life. Got my wife who I love to. but it's that sense, though, that we really are at a place where we're starting to say, let's see this guiding light in us, which this matters to you, this matters to me. It's not a big thing, it's an intimate thing. And we know that all art is created from the willingness to trust that subjective and that place of intimacy. And oftentimes when people shut us down, it's because they're very afraid of that in themselves, and therefore they don't want it in you. And that's where you realize, oh, well, maybe we're not ready to have this relationship. So maybe you think those friends of mine are yes people, but you know what? You could say that was the same in Paris in the 1920s, when all the great writers, all the expats were sitting around, Hemingway and all the rest, saying, you know what, nobody's buying our work. I think I'm going off to war. They're trying to find a way to create an identity, which of course they did. I mean, this is the great thing we find in the arts, the Dadaists, all these different small groups of people who got together and said, of course the world thinks we're crazy, because the world wants to go along without being bothered by that which it's unfamiliar with.
Yeah. You bring something to the table that challenges them, though.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Something that's different outside of the norm. And it's good, though. It helps for growth and stuff. Before I get you off here, have you seen the temples of humankind in Italy? Have you?
Damanhur?
Yes.
I've only seen pictures.
I know. It's beautiful stuff, right?
Yeah, there's some great relationship between what Alex Gray is doing on the East Coast, I'm doing on the West Coast, and Dom and her is doing in Italy. And it has to do with residence and resonance, this sense of a collective focus through art and community.
That's awesome. Well, Leigh, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, hanging out with me. Let people know where they can go to check out your artwork, check out some of your stuff. And
okay. My website is leighmccloskey.com, which is spelled Leigh, Mccloskey.com. You can put my name, Leigh Mccloskey, with art. I would highly suggest my talks on YouTube. We didn't get into it today, but my painting, Phoenix Arise, creates mandalas and a holographic DNA, another extraordinary revelation. I did a talk on mandalas recently. You might Google my name on the power and healing power of the mandala, art and healing power of the mandala. For the Love of Woman is another one. I did one recently on the mystery and meaning of the tarot, where I go through my tarot. They're very good talks. They're about 45 minutes long. And I would suggest them because they help really bring us in through art into these greater ideas of wisdom and wisdom tradition. And I think you'll be very inspired. But I would just really, even with the computer these days, just Google my name. But also my book, Tarot Revisioned, and my cards is such a helpful tool. Because I was able, like an archaeologist, as we do, to go much deeper because I didn't have an agenda. I actually just kept going. And after those 17 years, I can honestly say that, like Chippendale with a piece of good furniture, it's a darn fine good piece of furniture. So use it and be inspired. But thank you. And Derek,
awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. I'm gonna have to make it up there sometime. What state are you in? You're in California, right?
California. I'm in Malibu, California. So we're out on the coast, and I grew up 2 miles from here. So I'm a native boy. It's all homeboy.
Heck yeah! All right, my brother. Thank you for coming on. We'll have to get up and do something soon, man. I'd like to collaborate with you or something.
Okay, great, Derek. Thank you.
All right, my brother. Thank you.